Additionally, a character that you start right out with, along with your main guy, named Imoen, you can make them into a mage pretty easily, and I may or may not do that. I haven't really decided yet. So otherwise, the next group is the Thief, which is the fourth of the 4 original Dungeons & Dragons classes, again, in addition to the racial ones. Thief is what it sounds like. You can pick NPCs' pockets in this game. I don't usually recommend it because that's a good way to get a whole town angry at you, but you can do it, and if you pump enough points into that, you can get pretty good at it. The big thing that you can do a Thief for that makes them really awesome, and actually I'll say the 2 things you want to use a Thief for that makes them really awesome, and this is why I may not change Imoen into a mage, because the Thief is just too good. So first and foremost, your Thief character, when you're going into a dungeon, dungeons are often trapped, and so there's a couple different ways you can play traps. You can be really cheap and just memorize what the traps are. That's no fun. Or you can get a thief, put that thief up in front of your group, and then what you do is you have the thief run up far enough ahead of everybody. Oftentimes it's nice to have like an elven thief or that kind of thing, because they've got infravision, so they can see bad guys sometimes before the bad guys can see them. But you run the thief up a little bit ahead of your group, and then have them turn on their detect traps skill, and then they find all those traps and disarm them. Believe in Baldur's Gate 2 they get experience for that. I think actually that might be the case in Baldur's Gate Trilogy, since it uses the Baldur's Gate 2 engine. They don't get a lot of experience, but they do get a little bit, which is nice. But the big thing is that you see those traps and you can see them depending on where they are. You can either disarm them right there in the spot, or if you want to go in and see if you can get monsters to trip them, then you can go ahead and try that. The other thing that thieves can do, I guess 3 things now, since not just 2 but 3, they can set traps as well. So setting traps is basically kind of awesome. You set some traps, then run ahead, get some monsters to run at you, and then run back behind the traps in the path that you set up for yourself. Like you can set up a little minefield, for example, and then just use the AI's crappy pathfinding against it. So they'll just kind of run straight to the traps and set all them off if you set them up right, and you can kill off ant monsters sometimes before they even reach you that way. I don't use those a lot. Very rarely, in fact, do I find myself using traps with thieves a lot. That's just a personal preference. I've talked to folks who insist that is a way that you play Dungeons and Dragons, Baldur's Gate rather. But to each their own. Again, that's the cool thing about this game is there's like a million different ways to play. So the third and final thing, the thing that I use the thieves for the most, is the move silently skill. So basically, in combat or even out of combat, you can go into move silently out of combat. So what you do there, move silently and hide in shadows, they're kind of one and the same. So your party picture, your party, you got a couple fighters, they're fighting your guys up front. You got, a couple mages in back, they're throwing spells. So your thief, you can have them go into stealth mode and then loop around behind the bad guys and backstab them. Backstabbing is awesome. Number one, bad guys get a big disadvantage to their armor class, so it's a lot easier to hit them. I believe they're flat-footed. I think that goes back to 2nd edition, so they don't get like their dex bonuses to avoid getting hit. Number 2, huge bonuses to backstab, to damage when you backstab. So you saw that there was one of the ranger classes that had that. This is the same skill. So like thieves get that. So like if you use your thief well, it's kind of like using cavalry in a game in one of the Total War games. That it's they're a little bit underpowered normally, but they get back around behind somebody. Suddenly, like that's your super striker, awesome damager person. You just have to. They don't get very many hit points. They believe they still have a D4 in this game, so you have to make sure that they avoid getting hit themselves. But that is the big thing. Also, I tend to equip them a lot with bows because you can usually make them pretty proficient at bows. So there's a couple different types of thieves. Assassins are an evil class, but you do get the ability to poison weapons. Backstab does more damage. You can see eventually does 5 times as much damage. So I mean, you have a short sword. Short sword does a D6. Say just you can do up to 30 points of damage normally, which is a lot of damage. Like you won't find a lot of 30 hit point dudes until fairly late in the game. I mean, like 30. So monsters go by hit dice. Usually, I think a hit dice is usually, I want to say, a D10. So like a 3 hit die monster with maximum hit points has 30 hit points. So that's basically a monster that you would see a party face when they're 3rd level, more or less. It's not quite as cut and dried as that. Sometimes you'll find lower hit dice monsters at higher levels and higher hit dice monsters at lower levels. It all depends like the other stuff that they can do, but that's the basic rule of thumb. So like a thief, can go in and basically one-shot a guy like that with a lucky hit. I believe if you can get a critical hit on that, it doubles it on top of that. So it turns into 10 times as much damage. For assassins, it goes up even further than that to 7 times. So if you like this ability and you're willing to play an evil character, then this is great. Bounty hunters are actually a lot of fun. I actually might do a bounty hunter. The big thing is you get the traps, and you get a bunch of extra traps. They're kind of cool to use. The disadvantage is you don't get to distribute a lot between the different thief skills. So basically, if you're going to be this guy, you get that bonus up front to trap setting. You're probably just going to dump all your thief skills in detect and find traps. Finally, swashbucklers don't get any backstab multiplier, but that's kind of like the Errol Flynn character. They are really, really messy with this. This actually means they get a -1 to their AC, not a +1. +1 would be bad. But a -1 to their AC, also get a -1 to their armor class every 5 levels, so they're hard to hit even though they're just thieves. So if you have a nice dex bonus, which you would have as a thief already, these guys are very kind of similar to the Kensei actually. And then you get the 2-weapon fighting style that you can put a lot of slots into. You don't normally get to do that. So Thief's a cool class. I might end up playing a Thief myself, depending on if I decide to use Imoen as a mage. I'm kind of leaning towards making her keeping her as a thief, because you get, especially Khalid with one of the options that I put is a fighter mage, so he's multi-classed, but he still gets to use some mage skills. There is an enchanter that you get early on who I like because he's kind of awesome. He's funny. You may or may not like him, but I do. Then Mizk's girlfriend, who you also get early in the game, is a sorcerer, I think, and so she obviously she can cast spells too. So, or if you don't take Mizk for whatever reason, there's another guy who wants to kill the Minsk's girlfriend. So you kind of have to choose between them. But if you don't choose Minsk and his girlfriend, partner, whatever he calls it, or something else, you can choose this other guy, and he's a pretty decent mage as well. So yeah, so I mean, thieves are cool. They're not maybe the first class you might think of taking in a game like this, especially because in so many games like Elder Scrolls, frankly, a lot of the Elder Scrolls games just they aren't very good for doing this kind of thing. For doing thieves a lot of times. So I think the latest one's okay, but in the past, like, doing a thief just basically meant that you die a lot because you start leveling up and stuff that you can't actually use in combat, and it sucks. Anyway, though, in this game, since you're in a party, these are actually really, really useful. And in actual D&D, these are fun to play, especially if you use them little miniatures and being all nerdy with that, because you're so much of that game then becomes the tactical thing of like, okay, how do I get around these guys without seeing them and then get behind them so I can do my backstab? That's what this is about. Anyway, moving on, the Bard is kind of the jack of all trades. In real life, bards are those guys who got the lutes that are lutes, L-U-T-E-S, little guitar without the. I used to be a musician. I should know this. What the name of the soundboard? That's what I'm thinking of. They didn't have the soundboard in there, so they didn't carry sound as quickly. But basically, Bard can sing songs in battle, which are essentially buffs. Otherwise, they can do a little bit of thief skills. They're not as good as thieves, obviously. They can do a little bit of fighting. Nowhere near as good as fighters. They can do a little bit of casting magic spells. They're not nearly as good as actual mages, but they're kind of a jack of all trades. Kind of sounds to some folks that may sound like, hey, this sounds like a good kind of class for me to take so I can taste a little bit of everything. I would say not so much in this game. There are other good reasons to do a bard. They're kind of fun in their own right with the songs, but they're not. My opinion, if you want to do, you get the jack of all trades effect by having like 6 specialized characters. In my opinion, there's also a bard character you can get fairly early in the game. That if you really want to play a bard, you can use him. Additionally, though, so there's different kinds of bards if you really want to do that. The blade, there's a bunch of. It seems like they wanted to introduce that swashbuckler type a bunch of different ways. So, in addition to like bounty hunter and swashbuckler and kensai, there's this. This is based on the bard kit, though, so it's got its own issues that they get. They get the bard songs and they can do a little bit of thievery and that's the other thing. The bards get lore, which essentially allows you to identify items. So that is one reason why you might want to carry a bard around, so you're not burning identity scrolls. Otherwise, you've got the jester, which is kind of fun. It's basically a bard that instead of buffing guys, it debuffs your opponents, so it's kind of fun to use. You only get 6 slots, so if you want to use a guy who gets nothing but debuff, go ahead. Then the Nordic Bard, the Skald, is basically a little bit more fightery kind of bard, essentially. The Sorcerer is similar to the Mage, although I believe the difference with the Sorcerer is that, in fact, I know this is the case in 3rd edition. I'm pretty sure it's in 2nd too. In 3rd, you don't get as many spells, but to make up for that, you don't have to memorize those spells every morning. So it doesn't really work on a Vantian thing. You just get, 4 first level spells, and you can use whatever first level spells that are in your inventory. So you don't have to pick and choose. Then the other thing too is you don't learn spells from scrolls because you don't carry around a spell book. So you're not like Harry Potter wizard. You're more of, I don't know. It's not really an equivalent. You're a non-Harry Potter wizard. Okay, then there's the monk, which is, in my opinion, kind of the dumbest class in the game. The monk basically emerged when Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, and co. back in the 70s were watching kung fu movies and like, oh, dude, we should put that into the game. Yeah! So, the medieval monk, if there were skills in the game for getting fat and writing, then the monk that would be what the monk would do. But in this game, obviously, it's all about combat, so you don't get that. Instead, what it is as a monk, you every time you level, you can do unarmed attacks well. There's a couple of bow staffs and that kind of thing you can use to hit people with. Then basically, as you get higher levels, you can do more and more damage with your fists. Basically, you also get more unarmed attacks. You get better armor class. When you get up to high enough level, you can see there's a bunch of per level things you get. This goes back to 1st edition. You get up high enough, there's a quivering palm. Here it is. Quivering palm is basically what was that? From Kill Bill, that thing that Uma Thurman did to David Carradine at the end of it, where she she hit him in the gut, and he took 5 steps and he died. It's he got to linger on because he only took 4 steps, but then he took the 5th and fell over dead. That's similar. It's basically what that is. You do the one-hand attack, and then if you hit, they have to save versus death or die. We'll talk about mechanics probably in version 1. We're already up to an hour or more by now, so there's only so much I can talk about here. Finally, there's the Barbarian. Barbarian was a class was introduced in Unearthed Arcana, which, if you don't know the D&D history, that is a book that came out as a result of the kids' TV show Dungeons & Dragons that came out. There were a bunch of characters in the kids' TV show that didn't have an actual amalgam in the game at the time. Cavalier, Barbarian, there's Thief Acrobat. Actually, I think they did have the mages. Rangers were in there at the time. I think those are the main 3, the Cavalier, the Barbarian, and the Thief Acrobat. They didn't have those guys in the game, so they made a supplement that added those and a couple more classes, and then some extra stuff as well. So that's basically where the Barbarian came out. Since then, the Barbarian's been one of the more popular characters out there. It's like the fighter, only you don't get to you don't get like as much like weapon proficiency. You get to move really really fast. You're immune to backstab, and you can do the Berserker rage. So a little bit like Berserkers, but more berserkery. Yeah. Then, as said, you can't wear full plate because they're barbarians. You know, they're not used to our civilized ways, whatever, and so on. So, yeah. So those are the classes. I'm going to go ahead. I think, man, now that I've gone through them all, sometimes you get analysis paralysis with so many of these.